So here's a very basic statement, and felt like an insight when I thought of it, which is basically that narcissism subverts empathy. When we think about narcissism and all the traits that comprise narcissism and all of the confusion about it, one of the more confusing parts of it is that empathy piece, right? Traditionally, when we talk about narcissism, people talk about a lack of empathy. Simple. We don't call it the absence of empathy. That would be more of what we might observe in psychopathy. But lack is a tricky word. I lack money could mean I don't have any money or I don't have enough money. I lack manners could mean I don't have any manners or I don't have good manners. Lack is not the complete absence. It implies not having enough. And that tracks. Narcissistic people don't have enough empathy, but it's more than that. Because it isn't just about not having enough. It's about not having the right kind. Narcissistic folks often do great with cognitive empathy, sort of the understanding what someone feels, which is highly unsatisfying when you're on the receiving end of it. But they lack emotional empathy or compassionate empathy, where they actually have an emotional response or engage in behaviors that emotionally account for what another person is going through. They stop what they're doing. They help with the dishes. They offer to listen. They take the kids out for a while. But to anyone who has ever fallen in love with someone narcissistic, or is still in love with someone narcissistic, or has a parent who is narcissistic, you know it's not as simple as a lack of empathy or cognitive empathy or up and down empathy, because sometimes it feels like they get it. Sometimes you're both vibing on the same thing, and ooh, those moments are tricky as hell, because they really fuel the trauma bond. And they can be tricky for our own self-doubt. We may even doubt that this person is narcissistic because we fall into these simplistic holes. Narcissistic people don't have empathy, but that was empathy. Maybe they aren't narcissistic then. It's an easy syllogism, but it misses the point. Narcissism isn't about not having empathy, folks. It's about subverting empathy. It takes empathy and turns it into something performative, confusing, transactional, and weaponized. It's selective. Some people get it from the narcissistic people, and some people don't. It can feel like sunshine from heaven when you get it. And so if you get some, you might crave it more. But it can also leave us having a confused and twisted relationship with empathy. When we go through narcissistic relationships, we get taught lots of conflicting messages. Empathy is a weakness. We crave it. We feel it from the narcissistic people. We aren't sure if they have it for us. Sometimes we think they do. Other times we recognize not at all. Empathy feels like it should be simple, but again, narcissistic relationships subvert it, basically undermine it. They take this really good, essential thing and it gets twisted. Listen, with psychopathic people, empathy is not subverted. It kind of doesn't exist. So these relationships feel chilling, but there's really no ambiguity. With healthy relationships with healthy people, empathy is a life force, and it allows us to feel safe and connected and seen and heard and loved. But with narcissistic relationship, it's a mess. It's there, it isn't there, it tricks us. We wonder if we even know what it is. But you do know what it is. And narcissism turns one of the best parts of ourselves against us. We're playing on our willingness to offer up the benefit of the doubt. All of that's very unempathic, frankly. It dismantles this human experience we desperately need. And months and years after narcissistic relationship survivors remain deeply confused about empathy. They wonder if they are seeing or experiencing it the right way, and they may feel insecure about their own empathy. It's a subversion of something that's actually a natural human response and experience. The extraordinary aspect of most survivors is that most survivors don't lose their empathy, even having gone through these relationships. They have it, and sadly, many feel foolish for having it, but you do. And you may still feel empathy for the narcissistic person years later, even after you go no contact, and wonder, well, maybe I'm a sucker. Maybe I'm doomed to these relationships. Maybe I will never be able to discern. It's a blessing that your empathy doesn't go away. It means that a part of you could not be stolen, because that part of you is going to be essential for you to keep growing healthier relationships in the future and to be a human being. Discernment and empathy can happen together. Empathy doesn't mean you run into new relationship situations with reckless abandon. You can slow down. You can simultaneously have empathy for someone and recognize that they are unhealthy or uncomfortable or even dangerous. And that is what gets missed. We think empathy means that we have to engage with this person and make it work, whatever that means. Nope. You can have the feelings, but also the thoughts. Empathy, for all its simplicity, can be quite complex too. And it is why we may have empathy for someone we read about who has done terrible things, or when we watch a movie and a beautifully rendered performance of a cruel and awful character. When it's done right, we actually feel empathy for them. I talked with a survivor the other day. His wife had cheated on him repeatedly. He went back repeatedly. He knew her father was a cheater, and he felt bad for her, that was her backstory. But then she got pregnant with another man's child from yet another infidelity. He finally said, "Get out, we are done." A year or two later, he saw her. She looked sort of pathetic. The father of the child, who got her pregnant, had left her. Her financial picture was bleak. She couldn't manage affording childcare and all the rest of it. She basically made a very messy bed that she had to sleep in. And the man said, "I saw her someplace by chance." And she looked pathetic, sad, overwhelmed, like she had aged 100 years. She had opted for a lump sum financial settlement for the relationship. She spent it all. And I knew how hard this was all for her, but I'd gone to therapy and learned about narcissistic abuse. And what I didn't feel compelled to do was fix it anymore or try to help her out. I finally got it. And while I saw her that day, mercifully, she didn't see me, and I walked away. I still feel for her, and maybe it's more sympathy than empathy, but after years of getting hoovered back in and buying her victimized version of events, radical acceptance made it possible for him to stay in the two states of feeling so bad and sad for her, yet not feeling compelled to make it better. Empathy does get subverted in narcissistic relationships, but we can recognize that there is a healthy version of empathy that exists outside of the relationship, and it doesn't have to feel like a sucker bet, but rather we can get to the balancing act of healing, the middle path, not feeling overwhelmed by the tension of multiple things being true at the same time. And we can feel empathy and simultaneously disengage or walk away. And that is healing in its simplest and most important form. Feeling another person's pain or sadness or whatever feeling they are having, but not feeling that it is ours to fix or to take on. So yeah, narcissism isn't the end of empathy. It isn't the death of empathy. It is the subversion of empathy. I think that might be worse. Thanks again.